This GBVIMS video short is about good and bad practices in information sharing. Why is sharing information important? What are the different perspectives? For donors, there's a need to know how funds are being used and the impact. For the GBV subcluster working group, there's a need to check the relevancy of referral pathways and available services. For UN agencies, there's a need for data to make the case for funding or advocacy to fill gaps and address needs. For research institutions or the media, there's a need for analyzed information to inform others about trends in GBV and to develop theories and tools that could contribute toward improving the response to GBV globally. For service providers, there's a need to analyze trends in order to best structure prevention and response programming, improve referral pathways, make access easier, and provide needed services. Overall, for all actors, data can be powerful to make the case for resource mobilization, interagency coordination, identifying and targeting gaps, prioritization of actions, and improve prevention and response programming. What's a survivor's perspective when it comes to information sharing? For survivors, the answer varies. Some want their story, in the form of aggregate statistics, to be shared to help improve services for others. For some, their primary concern is about safety. There is a real fear of information getting out, of confidentiality not being protected, even if by accident, which can put the survivor at risk and also erode trust in service providers. The impact here is more than the individual survivor. It goes out into the community more broadly. Carefully approaching the issue of information sharing is needed in every setting to ensure the survivor perspective is the core consideration when determining what type of data is safe to share. For more on basic safety and ethics in GBV data management, you can watch our video on the topic available at gbvims.com. So what is safe to share? First, let's consider this pyramid, which is a visual representation of the principle of need to know. At the base of the pyramid, the service provision level, we're collecting service-based data that includes many sensitive details about individual cases. At this level, we're talking about something we call line data, or the information collected in one intake form. This is all of the specific details about the survivor, the incident, the alleged perpetrator, and referral information. However, as we move up the pyramid away from service provision, there's less and less need for individual specified data. For example, at the program management level, we don't need to see the cases broken down incident by incident. But at the service provision level, that information is necessary for case management because we're working with individuals. At the program management level, we don't always need the details and we can take more aggregated data. Finally, above at the country level or the coordinating agency level, there is even less need for individual data. At this level, you should really only be looking at aggregate anonymized data and not line data. Line data is internal to organizations and should not often leave the organizational level without being aggregated first. As information works its way up, the amount and specificity of data being collected, compiled, and analyzed decreases. For example, the thorough and detailed information collected in case notes and intake forms is important for service providers to ensure the client receives the best care possible. But as that information moves further away from the individual and their case management, you need more compiled data for analysis, less individual level, and more aggregate information. It's important to know the minimum types that are not safe to share. We say about these, it's important to know the 3 no's. No case file sharing, unless consented to by the survivor in the case of a transfer. No line data sharing. This means the individual level information collected in one intake form. And no incident recorder sharing. This means no sharing of the database, as this would effectively be sharing of line data. These types of information are unsafe to share at the interagency level, as they're not aggregated and they can identify the survivor. The good practice would be to develop an information sharing protocol, following best practices for safe sharing with other relevant local actors. An information sharing protocol process that is collaborative, inclusive, and respectful can build respect encourage information sharing, and ultimately improve the humanitarian response to GBV. In building or creating the ISP, the process is as important as the final product. This is the key opportunity to build trust and clarify procedures that will lead to more collaborative coordination overall. Another good practice, which seems obvious but is often overlooked, is communication. We can't say enough, communicate, communicate, communicate. We often see when problems arise, it's first an issue of not communicating enough. In that void, assumptions are made and decisions taken, which ultimately has a negative impact on trust. Now, knowing the needs for this information, the survivor perspective, and what's not safe to share, as well as good practices, let's talk about some of the other bad practices. A breach of the ISP is the most stark bad practice. Some examples of breaches are following up on individual survivors based off data shared through an ISP, unauthorized external sharing of consolidated data, not attributing due credit or including organizations' names when not consented to, sharing of data in an inappropriate format, or trends in sharing data late without communicating appropriately. So what are the consequences of a breach? In the worst case scenario, it could affect the safety and security of survivors, their families, communities, as well as service providers. It could erode trust, which could affect the help-seeking behavior of survivors in the community overall. Breaking trust among GBV actors. The process influences the product. When trust is broken, stakeholders are reluctant to share data externally. Or even worse, if a survivor realizes her data has been shared without her consent, they'll think twice about reporting possible incidents in the future, and may even discourage other survivors from coming forward. This can be incredibly damaging, considering that in most contexts, there is already serious underreporting. Other consequences. It could create an environment that affects other realms of interagency coordination. Distrust in one area can affect other areas. There could be an interruption or end of data sharing if enough trust is eroded, or the credibility of the data is called into question, meaning the purpose behind collecting the data can't be completed. Nothing is actionable at that point. So what do you do if you commit a breach, intentionally or not, and want to make things right? You want to avoid the building up of mistrust. So what do? First, communicate the resolution. If somebody committed a breach, own it and discuss it as a group. You want to avoid the practice becoming normalized and resolve it before it gets out of hand. Often these breaches are just misunderstandings that can be easily resolved if there's ownership and discussion. Second, revise the ISP. If there's a need, you can build in contingencies to overcome obstacles. If there's anything that's unclear, revise the ISP to make it more clear. Finally, and perhaps one of the most important and often overlooked points, coordinators should know the ISP content front to back. This is the best way to ensure adherence and avoid errors that lead to breaches. As a coordinator, you need to request authorization in the correct form with the right actors and listen first before acting. Never make assumptions about the preferences of the group. That's it today. Thank you for joining us for this GBVIMS video short. As always, be responsible with your data and learn more at gbvims.com.